Hi everyone, thank you for joining our webinar today. As you probably know, we'll be going through the opportunity to host a studentship using administrative data. Hoping this webinar provides some thought, put a face to ADR UK, at least mine and Saba's, and understand what we're aiming to achieve by running these studentships. So first, just to introduce myself, my name is Lizzie and I'm a research manager at ADR UK, and I've been managing the last cohort of studentships for the last 3 years. Later, we're going to hear from Jenny from ONS and Marta and Sonia, who are a current PhD student and supervisor, about their experience with us. As Saba did say, this is being recorded, so the recording will be published along with the slides on our website after this webinar. And to ask a question, please click the Q&A button in the toolbar to send a query to the team. So we're starting a little bit late, but we'll have a lot to get through. So to start with, I'm just going to introduce you to ADR UK, our mission, our strategy. Then I'll be setting out the application and breaking down the guidance and assessment. Then you'll hear from Jenny about actually how you access our data, in particular ADR England data that's through the ONS. And then Marta and Sonia will talk about their experiences of being a supervisor. As you see, there are 2 sessions for questions. So if you have a question and it can be answered by a member of the team, they'll respond to the chat. If not, we'll try to get to the questions in those sessions. So to those who don't know us, what is ADR UK? ADR UK is a research programme funded by UKRI and ESRC, and we are basically funded to make administrative data accessible to researchers across the UK for research in interests of the public good. And for those who also don't know, administrative data is any data created when people use public services, the tax system, our schools. It's not designed for research in the first place, and it's designed to inform the individuals on basically an operational basis. It's quite messy data, but it's very important because it's actually one of the most nationally representative assets of data that we collect, and we're working to make that available for everyone. So why were we formed? So ADR UK was formed to essentially try to bring this data together and make it linkable so that researchers could use it. So this is quite complex, and we work with multiple partners across the stratosphere to ensure the process is as smooth as possible. We have ADR UK core partners who engage and facilitate what data is informing, what data can be linked, what data governance is needed to ensure these linkages can happen, and to fund the access infrastructure so the data can actually be hosted securely somewhere for researchers to work on it. So just to illustrate here, we don't have the same partners for everyone. So England, we mostly work with, a lot of our data sets work with ONS, but say where the data is held separately across countries, such as education, we'll have to go to NISRA, Northern Ireland Statistics Research Agency, or SAIL to access that data. All data across the UK is eligible for this funding opportunity, so you could be working with any one of these partners if you are successful. So just to outline the ADR UK process, so we work with data owners and trusted research environments and with researchers. Everyone has a real important process to play in the whole objective of bringing administrative data to life. We work with data owners and data owning departments to identify what data can be used, and then we fund the linkage of these data sets. And because this data is unique and relevant, we have also fund researchers like the PhDs to use these data sets, not just for our understanding, to think about the benefits of the linkage, but more importantly, to provide opportunities to advance our understanding for societal good and address our biggest societal problems. And another element of what we do, even at PhD level, is public engagement, because this is public data. So it's really important that we keep the public informed about the governance and what the data is being used for in the process. Now, finally, ADR UK has a training capacity building strategy. This is very important to our overall mission, as it's enabling researchers to develop the skills, confidence, and support networks needed to work effectively with administrative data. Along with training courses and resources such as our website, the Studentships we fund is one of the main delivery routes that we use to build the skills to enable researchers to go on to do policy relevant research, but also to feel like that they can train future researchers to use our flagship datasets. Currently, we have done this through our cohort support model. So there's a support structures down there. So that triangle. So our previous cohort, we've supported our supervisors and the students with annual gatherings, one-on-one support, and occasionally priority access to our training or our mentorship programs. We want to build on the previous cohort success and also support a new round of supervisors to build a new generation of admin data researchers. And now I'll go on how you can apply for this. So, presuming everyone's okay, but just trying to make up the time and speed through things. So there's some key information we want to summarize here, which you should be familiar with if you have looked at documentation already. So there's funding available for up to 30 PhD studentships anywhere in the UK starting October 2027. When I say anywhere in the UK, that is because there is ESRC Doctoral Training Partnerships anywhere in the UK. As you see, supervisors who are not from institutions that are part of an ESRC DTP will not be eligible for this opportunity. If you're not sure, feel free to email us, but it's quite comprehensive, and I think most universities are included in this. So individual supervisors or supervisory teams can apply. I will say that I think most supervisors ended up bringing out someone into the supervisory team by the end of their project to help them understand the data. Applications must be at least 50% social sciences, so you can have someone from, say, computing also on the supervisory team, as long as the focus is on social science. Studentships must make use of an ADR UK flagship dataset, and funding will be based on the notional cost and length of the studentship. We do not have any restrictions regarding if it's part-time, full-time, or international students, if that's the kind of student you will recruit in the end. And managing the studentship grant will be the responsibility of the ESRC Doctoral Training Partnership. So this means our funding is not separate. It does not work in a different way than the UKRI studentships will overall. It will have to follow the same terms and conditions. So co-funding is available for this opportunity. To explain this, DTPs in the last round we did PhDs opted to fund their own applications, so to throw more applications into the ring, essentially. And then these were scored also by the assessment panel, and when they were found to be of a good enough quality, then these were added to the successful studentships. Though these were ESRC funded, the students were included in our overall cohort support model, so they got all the same things such as access to training, the check-ins, the access to our events, and our yearly gatherings, which was one of our main ways of delivering training to the cohort. But if you have any more questions about that, do let us know. I'll put that in the chat. So overall, for a brief timeline, the supervisor applications will have to be submitted to your doctoral training partnership before the 15th of September. So we have not set out any dates for the doctoral training partnerships, need to set their own internal deadlines by. So these could vary depending on where you are. So it's very important that you check with your Doctoral Training Partnership director about then when this is likely to be, because it's likely to depend on their capacity at the time. That being said, the DTP directors will not have to submit their 5 chosen applications from all the supervisors in their institutions and one form for themselves until the opportunity closes on the 15th of September. We will then have a panel including those in doctoral supervision and administrative data who will assess the quality in November, and then the applications selected will be based on a portfolio approach, with the aim to get the funding notification out by January 2027. But yes, again, we know some people are not knowing what DTP they're in. If you're unsure, your postgraduate office should know, or email us and we will tell you. So, as you've seen, we've just gone through the ADR UK mission and the training capacity building strategy, and proposals overall will be taken with this in mind. So given our overall aim is to make sure that our flagship data sets are used for the public good, think about when you're thinking about planning your studentship projects, think about what are we using the data set for? What kind of skill is this building in a student that will actually enable them to have an impact or find insights? And essentially think about, is this going to enable is this actually feasible? Is this actually going to enable them to build the skills they need? Well, we're going to break down the individual criteria a bit further. So DTP directors will be responsible for coordinating the application process. So again, we have not assigned those deadlines. The documentation you received, and it's on our website, is all the guidance there is to get on how they will assess his applications and select those 5 supervisor-led PhD studentships each. So the DTPs will have to think about how they will provide training and environment overall. They'll help students with administrative data. What is new compared to the last round where we did this was that the studentships was that we want a commitment from the Doctoral Training Partnerships that they will help studentships get all the technical and physical aspects in place that you need to access administrative data, as this was seen as quite a hurdle. And then they had to submit all of these to us on behalf of their Doctoral Training Partnership. So for the potential supervisors, again, a lot of this is in the documentation, so I won't go through it too much, but it is important for me to stress that if you're a supervisor, you should be trying to propose a feasible studentship project, both in terms of the research questions and the capacity of the supervisory team to support them. I've highlighted the areas for training for the supervisor because this is not a bad thing. This is not a bad thing. It's not something to be penalized for. It's something that we really want to know, that is our objective of being supervisors. Our last cohort had some supervisors that were really experienced with administrative data and others who are primarily social science based and had not had that experience yet. So it's just about being upfront. Training and trying to build capacity in administrative data is what we do. So if you're new to this, please do not feel discouraged. And it will just be about trying to plan that project carefully to ensure that you have either bringing on other people or you're fitting in that training that you or the student will need to be able to run this project effectively. So it's quite complex using admin data, which we hear from our research fellows. We have heard from, again, supervisors who have experience with like long form, longitudinal data that's quite complex, but administrative data is incredibly messy. And another thing is that a lot of our data sets have not been used that much, so there's not that many materials out there. So just bear that in mind. It's not a case of the more flagship data sets you submit, the better the application is going to be. think about consider the flagship data set, how big it is, how complex it is, how well you know the area, because 80% of the time for the student will just be data cleaning and getting to grips with that data. So I guess that's what I wanted to impress, that we want people to use it, our data, and it can sometimes be difficult and exciting. But if that's the case, maybe you need to build in more time for training. Maybe you want to bring in another member of your supervisory team who does know more about data. Either way, just some things to think about. So one of the essential requirements of our application process is the flagship data sets. So every single proposal must use a flagship data set from our website. And so you can list supplementary data sets in your application, because a lot of our students already have, and these are to just broaden it out, or data sets you think could complement the flagship data set. We also do have up and coming flagship data sets. However, these will not be considered. You cannot just list an up and coming flagship data set on your application. You have to list one of the flagship data sets from our website. And this is because our flagship data sets have been created because there is substantial potential to provide new data to fill evidence gaps and address pressing policy needs. Essentially, they address research questions that are very important to the government, to us, to society, and we would like them to be used. So just to highlight, and just say, while there can be some flexibility, because we know that you will not have finalized your research questions until you get a student. Though on the panel, we will be looking at if the research questions are relatively feasible. We will have expected applicants to have looked at the flagship data sets and at least consider the themes, what could be done. It doesn't have to be exactly right, but we're expecting all the applicants to research this and look at the web page, which is why we've made this restriction. So just to flag that we have a lot more new flagship data sets in comparison to our last round. So luckily, here's some of the few. Rapid in particular is being flagged as quite popular for economic researchers, and Nursing Midwifery Council for looking at nursing retention. So some of these we do already have a dataset briefing for. So all of our flagship dataset pages, the aim is to have a flagship dataset briefing where the data owners, data processors, or a researcher goes through the bare bones, the structure, the research questions of what you could do with the data set and how you could find out more information. We also had dataset briefings planned for this May. So if you are interested in any of the ones below, please do sign up through our website. So in this, just to highlight that we have flagship data sets that go across our work streams, and I do not have time in this webinar to go through them all, but also we have researchers who have already used the flagship data sets, so they can really inspire the kind of work you can do, the questions they've answered, how they've made an impact, and they're also just a useful point of contact, so you can see someone if you actually want to reach out and ask a question, and it's reach out, ask a question. So we really encourage you to browse those, because I think we have quite a wide coverage at this point, so could answer quite a few of your questions. So I'm not quite sure how quickly I sped through that, but I said we have time to answer some of your questions now, as I've information bombed quite a lot of you. So I'm happy to answer them live, or if there's one that many people are asking in the chat.
So hi everybody, yeah, I'm Jenny Kerr. Oh good, that's a thumbs up, you can see it. I work at ONS in the ADR liaison team. We work very closely with ADR on all sorts of things, actually, from the studentships to flagship datasets, fellowships. In fact, if I can say something really quickly about, there was a lot of talk of using lots of other datasets alongside flagship datasets. I just want to really address that really quickly. That's not always possible. It is in some cases, it isn't in other cases. So yeah, my advice early on would be find out about that data set. Okay, I was just answering that question, but I will move on. So yeah, definitely find out about the data set, the flagship data set you intend to use, because in some instances, for example, Leo dataset, you wouldn't be able to use that alongside another flagship dataset. You might be able to bring in other data external to SRS, but you couldn't use anything else that was in the SRS. So it's definitely worth doing a bit of research on that. So I will be going through very briefly now, a little bit about the SRS, a little bit about project application, what you need to do to become an accredited researcher, accessing the data, and so on. So I'm not, in the interest of time, going to go through this slide other than to say the middle bit, who I will be addressing later on. The SRS, I think Lizzie has already alluded to, is the trusted research environment that ADR have a lot of the flagship data sets in. There's other flagship data sets across other TREs as well, the other devolved nations. So I'm speaking particularly from the ONS perspective right now. So the 5 safes is how we run things in the SRS. We use the 5 safes framework, making sure that, people, project settings, outputs and data are all safe, secure, anonymized, and so on. Next slide, please, Lizzie. Okay, this was the diagram I was going to quickly talk about, but I'm not really going to linger too long on it because we're running out of time. But it does, at a later stage, have a look through it, just takes you through that researcher journey and connects it to the 5 safes framework. So moving on, becoming an accredited researcher. This can take approximately 4 weeks to become an accredited researcher, and there are 2 different levels. There's full accreditation and there's provisional accreditation. For full accreditation, you would need an undergraduate degree, including a substantial proportion of mathematics or statistics at grade 2 or above, or you need to be able to demonstrate at least 3 years quantitative research experience. In addition to that, you would need to carry out safe researcher training, agree to be included on the public record, and sign a declaration. And if you don't meet those criteria, you must have a supervisor, which is a bit of an odd conversation to be having because you will all probably be the supervisors, I'm assuming. So how you would apply would be, you can go through this link, which gives you a lot more detail about becoming an accredited researcher. You would apply on the hub. You would complete a safe research training and you would complete an online assessment. And in the next slide, which talks about submitting a project application, I have got this big blue box at the bottom, which says that as a supervisor, if you want to access your PhD students' project space, you must be an accredited researcher and should be included in the pass application, which I'm about to go through. So that's 2 things to remember. As supervisor, if you want to go into their project space, please make sure that you're an accredited researcher, and that, which was the previous slide, and that you go on to the project application. So when you actually go through all the discussions and, you've got your PhD student, and they go to apply online, they would apply through our project accreditation service for the SRS, otherwise known as PASS. And that approximately takes 8 to 10 weeks at the moment. Depends a lot on the complexity of the project, and there'll be a lot of back and forth. I have not touched anything again, and it has gone to the next slide. Don't know what's going on today. So there's a lot of information there. It's a very intuitive system, and I will move on in case I am actually being moved on, to speed things up a bit. The final stage is of the project application is to go through the research accreditation panel. It's all part of the PASS system, so this will be done when the application is in. And the RAP panel will look at the public benefit, feasibility, the ethics review, and so on. So there's lots of things that need to be filled in on that application. it moved me on. Accessing the data within the SRS. So level 1 access doesn't apply to any of our flagship data sets. They're all level 2 and above. Level 1 access is for SRS safe rooms in Fareham and in Newport in Wales. Level 1 also covers the SafePod network, which you can see a little diagram of the SafePod, 25 small self-contained rooms with single workstations. There's also a London School of Economics SafePoint hub, and I think they're talking about more hubs, so that's desk spaces. But the most important thing here is that all of that is included in level 2 access, which is the minimum level of access for our flagship data sets, which also means that you can get assured organisational connectivity, which is AOC access from your organisation if your organisation has an AOC agreement. The final level of access is level 3, which is for remote access using your organisational level agreement. That applies to some of the flagship data sets, which means you get all of these options. Some of them are only level 2 access, which means you get all of them, not including the final remote access working from home. They're usually things like Leo, Rapid, ASH, linked to pay and self-assessment. They would only have level 2 at the moment. It's really important because it can take a long time if your organisation does not have an assured organisational connectivity AOC agreement in place. It can take a long time from beginning to end, usually because of the number of hoops you have to jump through within the university. If your organisation has an agreement already in place, then it really is down to getting one for your department, and that can be quite quick. And I would strongly recommend that you look into the access options fairly early on, because it would be fantastic to be able to project approved and then you're up and running and you have access straight away. So I think I've whizzed through that super speed. Apologies for going so quickly. Please do get in touch. Customer support if it's an SRS related question. Our connectivity team, if you want to find out whether or not you have an AOC agreement already in place at your university or organisation. And then the ADR liaison team, that's myself. Lynn Barrett is also on this call, and we can put you in touch with whoever you need to be in touch with. But that's it from me. Any further questions? I shall stop sharing. I haven't even looked at the chat. Let me have a look at the chat now. There's probably things that come in. But...
Thank you, Jenny. We'll go on to the next presentation, and then we will try to get through as many of the questions as we can afterwards. I will say that what Jenny did really was stop talk. For any of our successful applicants, we would go through a lot more detail, a lot slower, and multiple training courses and reminders. But it's just so you have all the resources there, so you can think about how you plan the project when you put your proposal together. But so now we'll try hear from Marta and Sonia, if Sonia's managed to join the call.
So hi everyone, my name is Marta, and I am based at the University of Cambridge, the Faculty of Education, and I am in the 3rd year of my PhD, and I have been funded by ADR UK, and I have been using one of the flagship datasets, the GRADE dataset, for my PhD. I have been looking into the kind of decisions university applicants make as they go through the university application process. So I was working a lot on the UCAS data, for example, and I was specifically interested in how different social demographic groups make those choices. So for example, gender differences, socioeconomic differences, and so on. And I was supervised by Sonia.
Hi everyone, I'm Sonia, I'm Marta's supervisor.
So we'll talk a little bit about the reflections. Can you see the slides changing now? Yep, perfect. Okay, so I first wanted to talk about community, and I think that ADR student community was something that was very unique and something that I really enjoyed. And that was really, really useful because people often would encounter similar data issues. We would maybe have similar career interests, so we could we could talk about that. We could exchange experiences, and we had 3 ADR gatherings in different places around the UK. So it was really nice to also see how people's projects evolved over time. And I think in general, it was really nice to have those contacts because the PhD can be a bit different to what other people are doing at the faculty. Not a lot of people, I think, are using full administrative data sets for the PhD. So the community was really, really nice to have. I don't know, Sonia, if you'd like to add anything?
Yeah, thanks. So I think the point about community is really important, as Marta identifies. These flagship datasets allow for interdisciplinary or sort of different types of research during the PhD, and that doesn't always happen in the course of any PhD. And so having that community for Marta was very important for myself as a supervisor, because it meant that she had another point of contact in addition to our very large local community of doctoral researchers. But this is her show, so I'm just going to add small things. So back to you, Marta.
Thank you. Perfect. Yes, so when it comes to data access practicalities, which we of course just went through, but just from my own experience, I think it really depends on the kind of data you're accessing and all the other factors, but it's probably good to assume that it might take a few months and plan for that in advance. So I think it's definitely good to engage early with potential data sets to also understand what research questions are feasible, because it's possible that you might not find the exact variables to answer your specific research questions. So I think that's very important to tailor the research questions to the data sets early on. And while waiting for data access, I found that it was very useful to work with synthetic data. So the data that you can sometimes request, and they will be like dummy data, but you will still see the structure, which might allow for already writing some code and use that time while waiting for data access. And I think it's also really, really important to really spend time engaging with the data once the data access is granted, because as Lizzie mentioned, there is a lot of learning in how to work with the data, and I think that makes further analysis substantially easier if you really plan for the time for the student, for the supervisor, perhaps as well, to really get to know the data first. And yeah, and setting up home access, I found when possible and when the access level allows for it, can also be very, very useful.
And exactly as Jenny has said, this requires institutional level agreements. And so it is the role of the supervisor, if those agreements are not in place, to try to work them through. So if you find yourself being in the position to be the first doctoral student that has to go through this process, it's almost like a proof of concept experience alongside everything else. But it does mean that you will have to engage, or at least your supervisor will have to engage with all of the institutional structures in place around that. Now, in our case, we already had a short organizational connectivity agreement in place before Marta started, but it did not come with home access. So we worked through that during the course of Marta's PhD, and actually it made sense because the data that she was using was allowed for that kind of level of access. The key thing that I would say in relation to that, and just to reiterate what Jenny has said as well, that does take time. Alternatives exist, but one of the things that as a supervisor I've always paid attention to is trying to manage these timelines that are required for these organizational agreements for data access with any kind of institutional timelines around the doctoral program as a whole. So specifically in terms of however your program is structured, to make sure that these timelines align and allow you to do both at the same time, because both have to be followed.
Perfect. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And then moving on to data challenges. I think it really depends what your previous background is with quantitative research in general, with administrative data. So I think the initial work can be challenging depending on the initial skill set, and it might be useful in the first year or while waiting for the data access to take some courses and do training. And as I said before, definitely plan for the time when the data access is granted to really get to know the data and make sure that everything is well understood. Maybe go back and forth with people who might have used the data in the past. And I think very practically, what I found, and I can see that looking back, it's sometimes necessary to adapt one's working schedule to when the data becomes available, and also just general day-to-day work throughout the course of the academic year, because it's possible that you will need to plan for these more intense working periods when the data comes. And this is something that that it's possible that your own working time will be closely linked to those data access times. And in general, when maybe you're waiting for outputs to be released and things like that. It's really important also to remember that any output will have to go through a statistical disclosure check. So any output that you want to use for the doctoral dissertation or for some journal articles, everything will have to go through disclosure. And it's important to also know that if you want to then further make any changes in the output, that would require a new disclosure check. So this is also something when you think about your working schedule, is also something that you learn to work with. And I think it really depends on how you want to do it. It could be that you are requesting the output after every chapter, every paper, and this is something that you learn as you are working with the data and the whole system. So it takes time to establish those working patterns.
Yeah, so I'm mindful of time. So just very briefly, Marta and I had quite a lot of conversations early on about these disclosure checks and what it would entail and everything, but there is no replacement to actually doing it yourself and going through the process and understanding what works and what doesn't work and what's required and what the very clear guidance actually, but it is quite extensive guidance around the 5 saves framework actually looks like when translated into practice and what's possible and what's not possible to clear. And this is a very technical element of this, and it's not an analytical element, it's just a presentational disclosure check, but it is extremely important and something that we put in a lot of work with, but well, Marta put most of the work in figuring out the process. But the earliest one starts, the better.
Exactly. Yes, and that's the last slide. So studentship benefits in general. I think that the experience of working with those large data sets and being able to also develop research questions like directly connected to policy is quite unique, and it's a quite unique opportunity to use those quantitative research skills while working on a big data sets and really closely connected to policy, to real world challenges. You learn independence in data analysis, but you also engage with ADR UK, you engage with academic partners, but also non-academic partners. And there are a lot of opportunities to network. So for example, when we presented our research during the ADR UK gatherings, or there were opportunities for ADR conferences, you can meet with policymakers, you can meet with governmental representatives, and everyone is quite open to hear about the research and to hear about the data. So the network that is established is very, very valuable. And I know that there was an option to do work placement as well for at a governmental institution, but I know that it was quite limited for international students in our cohort, but I know that some people did it. So I don't know what the situation is right now, but I guess that's also something that could strengthen this policy connection. But in general, yeah, this experience of the data and the policy connection is very unique and very, very nice thing to do. Sonia, would you like to add anything?
Not everything that Marta has said, and as a supervisor, it's great for the PhD students to have this extra community, like we have both said, and that ability to build these incredibly employable skills and knowledge and understanding of the data infrastructure is genuinely invaluable. So we're very happy, and I think back to you, Marta, for your final reflection. Yeah, no, it was a very, very interesting journey throughout those 3 years. I am now at the end of my 3rd year. And it has been incredibly valuable, and I can see the kind of skills that I built. And it's not only the statistical and the more technical skills, but it's also the skills, as we said, when it comes to communication, when it comes to making sure that what you are doing actually responds to the current policy challenges. So it's really, really good. And I think it's really nice to have this, to know that we can create
impact, because we know that the data that we are getting and the policy challenges that we are working on is something quite relevant. So yeah, it's a really unique opportunity, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for joining. I'll say that I'll share slides around, and they do have QR codes which has all the links to the flagship data sets, the Learning Hub, and the applicant webinar. If we have our email, please reach out and we'll try to answer everyone we can. But yeah, I know it can be quite complex because we're doing administrative data, but it's also a doctoral PhD studentship that has different terms and conditions. So please just keep asking questions. But yes, I hope we'll get to meet some of you in future, and have a good rest of your day.